So this article was published about 14 years ago in foreignpolicy.com, and it's the argument of the intelligentsia, the left-wing intelligentsia that say that it's the occupation, stupid. All the terrorism, all the violence, all the hostility, all the conflict would be gone if you just remove the Israeli occupation. That's what it's about. It's the occupation. As the subheading says, extensive research into the causes of suicide terrorism prove that Islam isn't to blame. The root of the problem is foreign military occupations. And this is by Robert A. Pape, a professor of political science at the University of Chicago and director of the Chicago Project on Security and Threats. A great expert. It reminds me of those who said that the Afghanistan war was the cause of terrorism. Didn't 9/11 happen before that? Wasn't bin Laden's big grievance that it was America's support for Israel? Let's unpack this, because this is such a classic trope of people in the Western intelligentsia, where they try to basically psychoanalyze anyone that acts in a aggressive, violent way that's non-Western, and they'll always try to qualify them, to moralize them, and say, oh, it's just because they don't have this, it's just because they're a victim of this or that. You could have said the very same thing with regard to the rise of Hitler, by the way. The Germans were so defeated after World War One. It's only because they were so defeated in the First World War, because they suffered so badly economically, politically, socially, militarily, that they just want a bit of restoration of dignity. No, actually what they want is world domination. They wanted global world domination, and people just find that very hard to accept, because they don't understand that actually some people can be seriously ideologically hateful and committed to that. And so they try to explain away people's actions, but actually it is just down to a hateful, zealous, jealous, bombastic worldview. And I want to share with you a piece written by a journalist who responded to this very point, this very article, where he said, it's not the occupation, stupid. Written by Sol Stern, and he's a journalist, and he wrote a very powerful commentary, in fact, on a website called commentary.org, where he tears apart this argument. And what I want to do today is read it to you, because it's so important that we have the moral and historical and political clarity that it's not about a legitimate grievance of occupation. It's about a hateful ideology that cannot make space for the Jewish people. Let's have a listen to what he says. On the morning of October the 7th, waves of Hamas death squads entered Israel for the sole purpose of murdering defenseless Jews. The leaders of the Islamist terrorist movement were so confident they were on the right side of history that they boasted about their atrocities, released graphic videos of butchered Jewish mothers and babies, and then promised to do it again. Unfortunately, they weren't entirely wrong in their assessment of the likely world reaction. At an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council 2 weeks after the massacre, Secretary General Antonio Guterres opines that, quote, the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. Here we go again with the moralizing, the qualifying of the evil that they committed. By the way, I would add that Jews, the Jewish people, after experiencing the worst genocide in human history, did they go into German towns and start raping the women, beheading the German babies? It's sick. Guterres also repeated the 56-year-old UN mantra that the only realistic foundation for a true peace and stability is a two-state solution. Too bad the Secretary General didn't identify the party to the conflict that is doctrinally opposed through its founding charter to any statehood at all for the Jewish people. Funny how he didn't mention that. It means little that Guterres later tried to walk his comments back somewhat. The widely circulated statement by the head of the world body represented a previously unimaginable propaganda victory for Hamas and the other Palestinian terror groups. And since the occupation is not likely to end soon, it surely encourages more Nazi-style death squads. Credit for Hamas's achievement belongs as well to the international pro-Palestinian United Front that includes 5 members of the US House of Representatives known as the Squad. For the past several decades, this well-organized advocacy network has been arduously promoting the big lie that Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, plus the absence of a two-state solution, leaves the Palestinians with no recourse other than continued armed resistance, including the killing of innocent civilians. That twin falsehood, now endorsed by the UN chief, was repeated over and over again at the massive pro-Hamas demonstrations in the Western democracies. It is also echoed in parts of the mainstream media. What's most astonishing and depressing about the durability of this particular libel is not merely that there are mountains of historical evidence debunking it, but that Palestinian leaders themselves have repeatedly acknowledged there is no connection at all between Israel's occupation of the West Bank and the war they have chosen to wage against the Jewish state. Palestinian terrorists were sent to slaughter Jews during the years when there was an occupation, and they murdered innocent Jews when there was no occupation at all. In the centuries since the British Army liberated the Palestinian people from 4 centuries of brutal Ottoman occupation, they've had 3 pretty eminent political leaders: Haj Amin al-Husseini, Yasser Arafat, and Mahmoud Abbas. At several points during their varied careers, each had to make a fateful choice for their people between 2 separate historical paths. The first path would have led to an end of foreign occupation, either British or Israeli, and the creation of an independent Palestinian state. But it would have also required the Palestinians to end their war against the Jews and give up the dream of exclusive sovereignty throughout the land. By the way, I don't even think that's the dream. The dream is just not having a Jewish state. They wouldn't care if it was part of southern Syria. But I think he's just saying this for argument's sake. The second path was to persist in trying to eradicate Zionism, or later the Jewish state, but at the price of continued occupation. On 4 separate occasions, in 1937, 1947, 2000 and 2008, those leaders chose the second path, meaning more killing of Jews and more occupation, and more misery for their own people. A foretaste of the ruin to come occurred in Jerusalem on April 4, 1920, during the traditional Muslim procession known as Nebi Musa. As a result of the British military victory in the recent Great War, Palestinian Arabs enjoyed significant political rights for the first time in their history. At that moment, there was no Zionist occupation anywhere in the land. Nevertheless, Palestinian leaders were not inclined to use politics and public diplomacy to press for their goal of ending Jewish immigration. At the procession, Muslim notables harangued Arab mobs to storm into the Jewish quarter in an orgy of killings, looting, and rape. The victims were mostly pious Jews who had lived in the Holy City for generations and cared not at all about political Zionism. Because the Palestinian Arabs didn't yet have guns or bombs, the casualty figures were low by contemporary standards. Only 6 Jews were murdered, 200 injured, and 2 Jewish women raped. One of the ringleaders of the Nebi Musa riots was Haj Amin al-Husseini, the young brother of the mayor of Jerusalem. Another was Aref al-Aref, the 27-year-old editor of the Palestinian Arab journal, Southern Syria. The politically active journalist rode through the gathering crowd on horseback, chanting, "Palestine is our land, and the Jews are our dogs." It took the British authorities several days to restore order. Haj Amin al-Husseini and Aref Araf were tried and sentenced to 10 years in prison by a British military court, but they escaped the city. After this first of many Palestinian pogroms, the British government appointed Herbert Samuel, a British Jew with alleged Zionist sympathies, as High Commissioner of the Mandate's civil administration. One of Samuel's first official acts was to pardon al-Husseini and appoint the 26-year-old Islamist agitator as the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, charged with overseeing the city's Muslim holy places. Samuel also rubber-stamped al-Husseini's election as president of the Supreme Muslim Council. With those titles, the former Nebi Musa rioter became the most powerful political and religious leader among the Palestinian Arabs. Commissioner Samuel's strategy, taken from the British Imperial Playbook, was to contain anti-colonial resistance by doling out political patronage to rebellious leaders of the native population. In the case of the Palestinian Arabs, the approach was doomed to failure. Palestinian Jew hatred was already deeply entrenched and infused with Islamist religious doctrines. It could not be contained by political concessions then, or for the next 100 years. In 1929, al-Husseini used his seat of power to instigate new atrocities against the Jews, the Palestinian version of Kristallnacht. There was still no Zionist occupation of Arab land, but the Mufti spread the rumour that the Jews were plotting to take over the Haram al-Sharif, the Dome of the Rock above the Western Wall. His followers responded by again attacking the defenceless Jewish quarter, this time killing more than 130 innocents. A few days later, an Arab mob returned to the Orthodox Jewish community in Hebron, and they turned it into a killing field. 67 Jews were murdered, women were raped, and several men were castrated. Yet again, the British authorities sought to constrain the violence by offering political gifts to the perpetrators. A white paper was issued by the British government declared that Jewish immigration would be limited based on the country's, quote, economic absorptive capacity. The Palestinians and their maximum leader al-Husseini were not pacified. Al-Husseini was soon elected chairman of the 8-member Arab Higher Committee, which became the ruling political body for the Palestinian Arabs for the next 15 years. The AHC then initiated a full-scale rebellion against the British occupation. This time, the Palestinians had enough guns and bombs to launch hit-and-run guerrilla attacks against the overstretched British military forces. The declared aim of the revolt was the ouster of the mandatory regime and the elimination of the Yishuv, the name given to the organised Zionist community in Palestine. In the middle of the revolt, the British government offered the Palestinians the biggest political prize yet. A royal commission of inquiry chaired by Lord William Peel investigated the cause of the unrest, and in 1937 recommended the first ever two-state solution, the partition of Palestine into an Arab and a Jewish state. The Arabs would receive 90% of the territory for their state, with the Jews allocated a tiny strip along the Mediterranean coast. The AHC, with Chairman al-Husseini weighing in from exile in Lebanon, immediately rejected the offer and demanded Arab rule over the entire land of Palestine. Now, by the way, before I carry on with this, I just want you to see what the Peel Commission plan looked like, okay? Because this is what was proposed, okay? Because this is going to be extremely telling. So look at this. This is the proposed Peel Commission, okay? That's the Arab state. You've got a tiny Jewish state in the north, and then there's an international zone. So they wouldn't even accept that. So don't tell me that this is just about them wanting a state of their own and them wanting dignity. It's the inability to see the Jewish people return to their land because of the theological threat of seeing that God never forsook the Jewish people. But anyway, we'll continue with that in a second. Let's go back to the piece. So they rejected the plan, and David Ben-Gurion, the leader of the Yishuv, provisionally accepted the plan, however. The debate over the Peel Commission's recommendations became moot when the AHC resumed the military revolt. British forces didn't fully succeed in crushing the uprising until the eve of World War II in Europe. In the meantime, al-Husseini had moved on to Iraq, where he participated in the abortive pro-Nazi revolt against the country's British-backed government. Al-Husseini then fled to Germany, where he was welcomed by the Führer and hailed as a partner in the struggle against world Jewry. You see, there's so many Nazi roots to the Palestinian cause. The Mufti never felt so appreciated as he did during his years in Berlin. He was provided with a large house and staff and invited to meetings with Heinrich Himmler to discuss the war against the Jews. He had the honour of reviewing troops of the Wehrmacht and directly helped the German war machine by recruiting Bosnian Muslims for the Waffen-SS. As an experienced propagandist, the Mufti was put to work overseeing Arabic language broadcasts promoting the affinities between Nazi ideology and Islamic Jew hatred. At a private meeting in November 1941, Hitler informed al-Husseini about the coming extermination of the European Jews. In the German archives, there is a summary memo of that fateful meeting in which the Führer also tells the Mufti that his next objective would be the destruction of the Jewish element residing in the Arab sphere under the protection of British power. The reason that the Mufti allied himself with Germany was not that Germany was the enemy of his enemy, i.e. the British occupiers. Beginning in the mid-1930s, he came under the influence of Nazi racial doctrines and created a Palestinian organisation modelled after the Hitler Youth. He also sent Palestinian delegations to the Nazi Nuremberg rallies. According to the widely respected German historians Klaus Michael Malmann and Martin Kuppers, if Rommel's Afrika Korps had won the battle at El Alamein and then conquered Palestine, the Mufti would have gone along to supervise another final solution for the Jews of Palestine. After the German surrender, the Mufti was captured by French military forces and placed under house arrest in a villa outside Paris. The Yugoslav government requested his extradition to face trial for the war crimes he had committed in the Balkans, but al-Husseini was shielded from prosecution by high-level government officials in the US and France determined to protect Western influence in the Arab world. In June 1946, French security forces guarding the house where al-Husseini was detained conveniently left the door open and he escaped to Egypt. The Mufti was granted asylum and received a rapturous reception. In Cairo, he was greeted as a conquering hero by the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna. The Mufti al-Banna declared, "Challenged an empire and fought Zionism with the help of Hitler and Germany. Germany and Hitler are gone, but Amin al-Husseini will continue the struggle." Within months, al-Husseini was reinstated as chairman of the Arab High Committee, now officially recognized in international forums as representing the Palestinian Arabs. With Great Britain winding down the Palestine Mandate, the AHC vehemently opposed any discussion of partition, and al-Husseini's armed gangs threatened and intimidated Palestinians who thought otherwise. After the passage of the UN Partition Resolution in November 1947, al-Banna and al-Husseini combined forces and sent thousands of fighters into Palestine to begin the first full-scale war against the Yishuv, with the intent of aborting the Jewish state. It was the second time during the Mufti's tenure that he chose to continue the war against the Jews, rather than accept a plan that would free his people from foreign occupation and allow them to establish an independent state in most of the homeland. During that period, the American left understood that the emerging Jewish state was threatened by enemies steeped in Nazi doctrines of eliminationist antisemitism. Before the UN General Assembly voted on the partition resolution, The Nation magazine submitted a lengthy report to all the member states titled The Arab High Committee, Its Origins, Personnel and Purposes. Supervised by longtime Nation editor Frieda Kirschwey, the report urged a vote for partition and declared that the AHC was an almost exact equivalent, in Middle Eastern terms, of the cabal that ruled Hitler's Germany. The theme that the Palestinians were led by Nazi collaborators was also stretched in the dispatches written by the legendary leftist reporter I.F. Stone. In This Is Israel, Stone's book about the 1948 War of Independence, he refers to the Jewish state as a tiny bridgehead of 650,000 surrounded by 30 million Arabs. He quotes the head of the Arab League, Abdul Rahman Azam, declaring, "This war will be a war of extermination and a momentous massacre, which will be spoken of like the Mongol massacres and the Crusades." Stone blamed al-Husseini and the Arab High Committee for creating the Palestinian refugee crisis. The Palestinian leaders reminded him of the fascists he had fought with his pen since the Spanish Civil War, and he ticked off the names of Nazi veterans leading Palestinian military units attacking Jewish settlements. German Nazis, Polish reactionaries, Yugoslav Chetniks, and Bosnian Muslims flocked into Palestine for the war against the Jews, so reported. The Jewish state won its war of independence, but 90% of the Palestinian people came under foreign occupation. The Kingdom of Jordan annexed the West Bank. Egypt took control of Gaza, yet there was no occupation protest by the local population. The new arrangement was particularly rewarding for Aref al-Aref, veteran of the 1920 Neba Musa riots. He became mayor of Arab Jerusalem and loyally served the Kingdom of Jordan for the duration. That's funny. No issue of occupation there. He also had time to write a history of the Palestinian struggle titled The Nakba of Jerusalem and the Lost Paradise. During the period of Jordanian and Egyptian occupation, there were few opportunities for Palestinians to fight the war against the Jews directly. Instead, the legend of the Nakba was used to depict the creation of the Jewish state as a catastrophe for the land's native people, so much so that Israel had to be erased by any means necessary. During this brief interregnum, the Nakba myth allowed the Palestinians to continue to struggle through historical narrative. It is true that after winning the 1967 war, Israel took over the West Bank and the occupation continued for the next 56 years. The occupation of Gaza was ended unilaterally by Israel 18 years ago. It is equally true that Israeli governments of both the left and the right worked assiduously to end the occupation and allow the Palestinians to create their own independent state. Israel's left-wing Labour government initiated the Oslo peace process in 1993. By September of that year, it culminated with the famous handshake on the White House lawn between Yasser Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. At the time, Arafat was stranded in Tunis in a very precarious position. His PLO cadres were expelled from Jordan in 1970, thrown out of Beirut by Israel's army in 1982, and then again kicked out of Tripoli, Lebanon, by the Syrians. Arafat's reputation was in tatters among the Arab government because of his impetuous decision to support Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait. Yet the Rabin government was so determined to end the occupation and achieve a two-state solution that it threw Yasser Arafat a lifeline and made him a serious negotiating partner. According to their signed agreement, Arafat would be brought back to the West Bank to preside over a fledgling Palestinian government. After a 5-year interim period, the parties would negotiate a final status arrangement that contemplated an independent Palestinian state living in peace with Israel. In the spring of 1998, Arafat and his top lieutenants in the Palestinian Authority began conferring about the final status negotiations due to begin shortly. It was at this point that Arafat announced the first commemoration of Nakba Day. To avoid delivering on the promises he made 5 years earlier, Arafat chose to weaponize the Palestinian Nakba narrative into a declaration of permanent war against the Jewish state. The key element of his May the 15th Nakba Day speech was the claim of 5 million Palestinian refugees who had a sacred right of return to their homes in Jaffa, Haifa, and dozens of formerly Arab towns and villages in Israel. From his Ramallah headquarters, the PA president read out the marching orders for the day's violent demonstrations over Palestinian radio stations and public loudspeakers. Quote, "The Nakba has thrown us out of our homes and dispersed us around the globe. Historians may search, but they will not find any nation subjugated to as much torture as ours. We are not asking for a lot. We're not asking for the moon. We're asking to close the chapter of Nakba once and for all, for the refugees to return and build an independent Palestinian state on our land, just like other peoples." By our land, Arafat included Israel, thus unilaterally ending the Oslo process. At the time, only one exceptional Palestinian leader knew exactly what Arafat intended and was willing to say so. It was Sari Nusseibeh, the PA's representative in Jerusalem. In his memoir, Once Upon a Country, Nusseibeh describes a meeting with Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas on the issue of the refugees' right of return. He recounts the following exchange with Abbas. Nusseibeh said, "You have to level with us. What is it you want, a state or the right of return?" Abbas, "Why do you say that? What do you mean by either or?" Nusseibeh, "That's what it boils down to. Either you want an independent state or a policy aimed at returning all the refugees to Israel. You can't have it both ways." The right of return for 5 million, now 7 million alleged refugees was a deal breaker not only for Israel, but also for the Clinton administration that brokered the Oslo Accords. Nevertheless, Arafat was dragooned by President Clinton to go to Camp David in 2000 for the final status negotiations. The outcome was a foregone conclusion. The PA president stormed out of the meeting after turning down a generous offer for an independent state. Mark the year 2000, then, as the third occasion that a Palestinian leader chose to continue the war against the Jews, even if that also meant continuation of the occupation. Yet another round of negotiations that might have ended the occupation took place 8 years later. This time, directly between Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and PA President Mahmoud Abbas. The two leaders held 35 one-on-one meetings in Jerusalem over a span of 7 months. At the last session on September 16, 2008, Olmert offered Abbas an independent Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem. He shared with Abbas a proposed map of the borders of the two states that, though territorial swaps would give the Palestinians almost 100% of the territory of the West Bank and Gaza that the Arabs had held before the 1967 war. Abbas took the map. He said he would never consider the offer and return in a few days with his answer. But he never came back, and the negotiations abruptly ended. It was the fourth time in 70 years that the recognized political leader of the Palestinians made the choice to continue the war against the Jews, which also meant extending the Israeli occupation. In a scoop, the liberal Israeli newspaper Haaretz published the map that Olmert gave to Abbas. The PA president should have been embarrassed by the map's release, since it made clear that he had missed the best chance in 56 years to end the Israeli occupation. Instead, Abbas claimed his hands were tied over the refugee issue because the Palestinian masses would settle for nothing less than the right of return. What happened, by the way, to the right of the return of the 900,000 Jews expelled from Arab lands in 1948? It's just ridiculous. The right of return of my grandpa, who was forced to flee his family apartment in Poland in 1939. It was taken over by the Gestapo and then the local Polish police. What's his right of return to that? It's absurd. Anyway, back to the article. The Olmert map remains an indispensable historical document. By the way, one other thing I'd add is the displacement that occurred was not largely Israel's fault. It was the fault of the surrounding Arab armies, which said, leave, let us kill the Jews, and then you can come back. Anyway, the Olmert map remains an indispensable historical document, the most graphic proof yet that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not about the occupation. It should be displayed on posters and banners and waved in front of all UN officials and pro-Palestinian demonstrators who continue to claim, against all the evidence, that Hamas and its allied Islamic terrorist networks are merely resisting oppression. Like other days of infamy and horror, including December the 7th, 1941 and 9/11, October the 7th should be remembered as a moment of illumination and clarity. 18 years after Israel unilaterally evacuated the Gaza Strip, Hamas sent its killing squads across the border to fight what the group believed is an occupation. For Hamas, though, the goal is to end the 75-year-old Zionist occupation of Tel Aviv and every other city and settlement in Israel today. Or to put it more directly, the Jewish state is still fighting its war of independence. Even the allegedly more moderate Palestinian Authority declares that the 1948 war is still ongoing every Nakba Day, when it sends tens of thousands of violent demonstrators to the streets, chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." The very same slogan is now also routinely chanted at college campuses and public squares all over the United States. The mass murder events of October 7th have understandably evoked memories of the Holocaust. In a phone call with President Biden, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Hamas committed acts, as in Babin Yar, where Jews were machine gunned in killing pits. Although morally correct, the comparison is not quite precise enough. Babi Yar occurred 1,000 miles away from the Middle East. Hajj al-Hussein and Hassan al-Banna worked for a final solution for the Jews of Palestine. It's more appropriate now for Israelis to focus on the strictly local political and religious antecedents of the October 7th massacres. The Hamas Shaheeds of today are the spiritual children of al-Husseini and al-Banna, and of the alliance between Islamic Jew hatred and Nazi eliminationist antisemitism. Hamas was created in 1987 as the Palestinian branch of the Egyptian Brotherhood. Its founding charter speaks of a Sharia state similar to the Caliphate. Its religious slogan is "Islam is the solution." But it is the legacy of al-Husseini and his embrace of Nazi Jew hatred that drives Hamas's political and military policies. How dispiriting it is, then, to recall the many occasions over the past 100 years on which otherwise well-meaning British and Israeli officials fell into the trap of believing that this Islamist Nazi ideological movement could be bribed into relative normalcy with political gifts and accommodations. Even the allegedly hardline Netanyahu governments of the past 15 years willfully ignored the lessons of history and complacently believed that Hamas had been deterred by bundles of cash. The slogan "Never Again" has historically referred to the catastrophe in Europe where defenseless Jews were led to the slaughter. It must now take on a second meaning in the Jewish homeland. Self-defense is not the issue there. The people, the ordinary citizens of Israel, have shown over and over again that they can come together as one, rise to the occasion, and defend their communities. It is rather that Israel's governments and politicians must now pledge, never again, meaning never again will we be lulled into complacency or forget the brutal lesson of the past 100 years. When avowed enemies steeped in Nazi and Islamic Jew hatred announced that they want to kill us, we should take them seriously and prepare to kill them first. Finally, never again will we believe that such enemies can be bribed into decent human behaviour. That's the end of the piece, and that is the fundamental error of those who say it's about the occupation. Many of those who say that are just complicit in the Nazi eliminationist jihadist hatred. And those who aren't, the intelligent academics, the intelligentsia, the academics of the West who say it, they are just delusional. They're living in an ideological fantasy that says everyone can be normalized, everyone just has their own legitimate grievances, that if you appease, you can create peace. Appeasement never works. Appeasement with bullies, appeasement with people who just have an ideological hatred, it doesn't work. The only way you get peace is through strength, through deterrence, and removing the threats. There's been a massive paradigm shift post-October 7th, and I think though it was absolutely horrific, we can at least be grateful for the clarity that we now have, that we will never again dance to those old tunes of two-state solution, thinking that that will solve the problem, of thinking appeasement or getting rid of settlements, of all those things. It's actually going to create a much more better outcome, because now Israel, the people of Israel, and certainly the Israeli youth, are going to do what they've always needed to do, which is to simply declare the truth boldly, that the entire land of the entire land of Israel, from the river to the sea, is Jewish, and the Palestinian cause is made up, it's phony, it's not a real nationalist cause. It was created to eliminate the Jewish people and the Jewish state, because it's about an Islamist worldview that sees them as the new chosen people and the Jews as the forsaken, scattered wanderers of the earth. And for the Jews to return to their homeland, maybe God never forsook the Jewish people. Well, we can't have that, so we have to get rid of them. Instead, they're just going to have a moral and ideological maturity. The whole land is Jewish, from the river to the sea. Non-Jews that wish to live there in peace and cooperation, great. We have no issue with that. But those who are in any way hostile, who are in any way a security threat, who will not tolerate or accept the Jewish state, will be dealt with in the appropriate way. That's the path that we need to go down moving forward. It's the only sane approach. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.